Welcome to Torah Anytime, Daily Zohar. Today we're going to deal with try to deal with the concept of human will, or willpower, or what exactly that means. So that concept of will in Kabbalah in general, specifically, in Judaism in general, but in Kabbalah specifically, has tremendous significance to it. And it is, in a way, much broader and somewhat different from what we call will, just regular will or willpower. Let's use, for example, who's that?
No, I thought the door was
Let's use an example. Let's say a person is buying a house that is in last stages of building. And is about to finish building the house. Before that present stage of finishing the house, there were other stages that involved that house itself. For example, there was the stage of planning. The architect sits down, draws the plans. Before that, there was the stage of thinking about it. You don't just sit down and you take the ruler and you start sketching out together and putting out the pieces. You have an idea of what you're going to do, and then you execute it in the sketches that you do. That's even before you went on the ground. And before that, there is one more stage, which is the stage of, in which we're going to think in the planning. We're going to decide is it going to be a residential area? Is going to be a residential building? Is going to be commercial? Is going to be, what's the purpose of that? In other words, determining the target or the purpose of that or the usage of that building. And before that, the initial stage is the stage of wanting to build a building to begin with. So first you want to build a building, then you determine what do you want out of this building, then you design the building, then you start building it. That's the process. So let's expand a little bit more on that. So if you're going to arrange that and we'll put order into that, so therefore the first stage is the willingness to build the building. The second one is the machshavat abniyah, the thought of the building. In other words, we're going to collect the data on all the different possibilities that we have. Can we build it in this lot that we have? We need to survey it. All these things are including in that stage. The third one is the execution. And the execution is very important because that's the stage in which we call it in Hebrew hama'avar ben hakoach el hapo'al. Koach, machshava, the thought, from the planning into action. Right now we just talked about we made the plans, but the action is the actual building. So that's the stage. The third stage is that taking that concept, this as abstract concept, and not putting it into work, because even though you had a plan, many times, as you know, you have a plan, and then while you're building, there are problems which would require you to change things and so on and so forth. So that stage is a very crucial stage of connecting all the processes of planning into action. That's called shlavei haratzon, the stages of will. And machshavat abniyah, and the thinking of building, was just bekoach. It was just in theory. I wanted to build. There was a theory about building, and in the execution stage, that was when the building became a reality. Many times ourselves. In theory, we have plans many times for ourselves. In theory, I am In theory, I am capable. In theory, I want to. But practically, for whatever reason in my life, I never achieved that because I was missing this ability to transfer the plans and to execute them into an action. That is the most important thing, maybe. Sometimes people just act without prior thinking. Chazal tells us no. The process of action should be sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila. You need to, what does it mean, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila? You need to think about the end point, the end result. Where do you want to go with it? And then go backwards, and now you're going to say, how am I going to get to this? Many times I tell guys, you're 20 years old, probably going to retire, unless they're going to change it to 80. So it seems like it recently. You might retire at 67. So on average, you have about between 40 to 50 years to work. You go to college, or you make your plans as what you see yourself now doing. You should, before jumping to college and take all these things and so on and so forth, you need to look at, to be able to bring yourself up, look over the fence. Where do you want to be in your life? How do you want your life to be when you're 60 years old, when you're 70 years old? What dream do you have? What is your plan of how it is going to be? Then, now you know your life, you want your life to be that. X. Good. Let's see what we can do now to make this happen. How am I going to get from where I am now to where I want to be? Very few people do that. When we don't do it like this, we start one way, and one day we open our eyes, and we're in a place that we don't know how we got to this place. And you're going to come to this place, and you may ask yourself, how did I get here? I have a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, how did I get here? How? Letting years go by without prior planning. You let the water carry you. You go with the flow. The only thing that goes with the flow is dead fish. You have no plan. And yet those people who always sit on the fence. Regel po, regel sham. One leg here, one leg there. They make all the plans. Tremendous plans for their lives. When it comes to do it, nada, niet, nothing, nicht. We need to connect that to that. Thought to action, thought to action, thought to action. Why is it very important for us to understand it? Because we operate in a certain way. The question is, how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu operate? And that's what we need before we're going to get into his part. We have to understand human ratzon will, because it's only a copy of God's will. But somewhere along the line we mess up. The reason is this. So therefore, if you're going to look very carefully around you, we will see that reality on all its components, or what will make your reality, already passed this process. When a person builds a house, or he builds a factory, or he builds whatever he builds, he makes a road, or even does simple actions like writing a letter, sending an email, making dinner, getting ready to retirement. Any of these actions, there is a certain, or should be, a certain order with a certain process of logic. And I would say even a certain pattern. Certain people do certain things on patterns all the time. Not you're an OCD. A little bit OCD is always good, not too much. That patterns of our lives is what determines our life. And there is usually a gradual stage of things, of evolvement. There is the will to act, ratzon lif'ol, the will to act, a thought that would include all details of action and its target, and there is execution of it. There is the performance of that, the execution of that. You need to look at your thought, at your life. You need to look at the actions that you do. Do you follow this thing? Is there a prior thinking? Is there initial thought? Is there a well thought target? How I'm going to get there? And do you really end up executing that? One of the worst things that I heard throughout my life, and I think it's the worst thing that a educator can tell a child, and of course through the parents, is you have a lot of potential. A lot of potential. But you're a little lazy, or if you would just try a little harder, you would reach great things, but you have a lot of potential. It's wasted though. Why are you telling me that? Show me how to do it. Maybe I don't know how to put the orders. Maybe you taught me wrong. Show me how to tap into my potential. The reason is we don't live to our potential is because we are not organized in the production of what is so-called our life. You have to go. I mean, what's the point? I mean, we kind of lost track of what schools are all about. But what's the point of, if I need to go to college, what's the point to go through elementary school, high school? I'm going to go straight to college and that's it. Get your diploma, goodbye, good luck. There's a certain development of the person as well. With his intellect, with his ability. Yes, you learn the same topics again in college, which you probably learned in 9th grade. But now it's on a different scale. There's a development. There's a certain pattern you need to go through. And again, most of us fail or fall short, not because of lack of abilities, but because of lack of direction on the process, on the stages, how to move from one stage to another. We like everything instant. That, in return, creates a tremendous dependency and lack of satisfaction. What is better than to come home and to be able to think what you're going to eat, and then you're going to take the stuff, and then you're going to prepare it. We don't like it. What do? We go right outside to eat. We go to a restaurant to eat. We skip that ceremony, which are, again, very important in our life. So therefore, we're going to ask ourselves a question, and that becomes the will and potential or ability. If you ask yourself if a person is doing, a human being, a person is doing an action, is doing something, could you derive for it some kind of, or assume something about his ability of that person? In other words, if, for example, you have an engineer that designed a bridge to go from one side of the creek to the other side of the creek. So therefore, it's a small bridge, not so sophisticated, very stable, but nevertheless, it's a small bridge. 2 cars max can go in. Could you assume that that engineer is not capable of building a large-scale bridge? Wider, bigger, longer. If I have those closed bridges that they have, the wooden ones, a beautiful one like this, and the guy designed this bridge, does he now only capable of thinking small bridges, or he can build me a George Washington Bridge, or Tappan Zee, or Golden Gate? Can I learn from his actions about his abilities? The answer is absolutely not. You can't. And the reason is very simple. The engineer designed the bridge according to the needs. It will be an overkill to put a bridge with like a Verrazano bridge on a 20-foot creek. It'll be an overkill. You don't need that. He designed it according to the needs of what he needs to do. You therefore don't learn from the actions about his abilities. You learn from the actions of the person about his will. Because that's what he wanted, to build a small bridge for that. Because if he did not want to build this bridge, he would not build it. And he built it on that. Because remember, we said you need to learn the purpose before you go to the execution. You need to learn the purpose. And this is to cross as a pedestrian bridge. I don't need to do like suspension and with this whole complicated thing. This is that. That does not mean that the person who designed this bridge does not have an ability, but rather that he reveals to us his will that is based on the needs of that particular case. So therefore, we could assume that if will means achieving a specific purpose, and therefore you don't have a human will that does not have a purpose to it. It has to be a purpose for every human will. Why? Because that specific purpose is the only thing that limits the will. What does it mean? If a person has to be all the time in a constricting environment when he is always worried about his survival, he would not be able to create, for example, great artifacts of art and create symphonies and complex music and so on and so forth. You might have some form of primitive art. You might have some cavemen, in southern France engraving some characters on a wall. But without a doubt, it's not going to be Salvador Dali or Picasso or Monet or who knows what. It would not be. Or Leonardo. If Leonardo da Vinci had to worry every single day how he's going to go to the prairies and get some food, he would not be able to be Leonardo da Vinci. That's why it's very important to also move from constricting stages and environments to something that will be more open. So you can think. Don't constrict yourself. Because if your tachlit, if your target is of a certain nature that would restrict or, in a way, prevent your abilities to really come to express themselves. So therefore, if we go back to the student, if we have a student that is failing, where on paper he has the abilities, unless he has a learning disability, the problem is with the constricting environment of the school, not necessarily of the teacher, because many times the teacher is constricted himself or herself not to learn, is not allowed to engage. So this the ability to disengage the student in a expandable environment that will allow him to go, the reason the result will be that the student himself will be constricted, would not be able to tap into his true abilities, because the classroom environment is constricting. So what they do sometimes in an education system is just the opposite of giving the students the ability to succeed. They're constricting them, but they're not wanting to understand it, because it's all about control. And the more you control people, the more constrictive they become, the less their ability to think big. It's so much to that the Rambam himself, and I'll show you now that there's no difference between Kabbalah and the Rambam and so on and so forth. The Rambam says, and the Gemara says, Ma ben Yemot HaMashiach. What's between the Messianic era and our times? Nothing. There's no big difference. Lions will still be lions. Sheep will still be sheep. Lions will eat deer, and deer will eat grass. Lions are not become vegetarians. This is Olam Kiminagono et Elama. The Jews will be left alone, free, without any oppression of the nations, to simply learn Torah. That's it. We're not going to have worries about Parnassah, about this nerve gas coming, missiles coming. You're going to be free to do that. You'll be free. That's all. This is how you bring the light. You open the window, the light goes out. You constrict it, it's like the Shabbat candles, you know, the light. So you close it, you know, the light is there. You just have it on the wrong opening. So therefore, from the actions of, we could summarize it, from the actions of a man, we can learn of his will. From the action of a person, we could not learn about the magnitude of his abilities, because the actions would, the situation would restrict his actions, and that the target and the purpose of that particular person to reach the goal is what limits his will and his own actions. There is the target, not him. If I would, as a boss, would not allow you to think freely, I would restrict you, and therefore your action will be restricted as well. Companies in which allow free-flowing ideas and communication with their workers are usually more successful. You go whenever you want. Let's hear. It's a good idea. I don't care if you work in the mailroom. If you ever go to a good idea, you walk into the CEO, you knock on the door, door is open, speak. Like, for example, Google. Or Apple. At the time, at least. So now, there are two ways about will, or human will, and it's going like this. We were talking about two different ways, or two different expressions we use. Is A, let's use the engineer. What the engineer could have wanted, and in what the engineer wanted, which is the maximum. You know, he wanted to build a big city or big building, and whatever he was restricted by budget and so on and so forth. You give a proposal, it's too big, therefore you have to scale it down and so on and so forth. So these are the will, and the restriction will come based on the goal itself. What do I have to tell you? This is just an introduction to understand, because it's closer to us. Be'ezrat Hashem, we can talk about creation later on in a different time. But you have to do a favor to yourself. When we want to say to somebody, you have all the options open, we say the sky is the limit. From now on, that's not good enough. That's, by the way, what America was America. When America defined itself as the land of endless opportunities, America expanded and became what it became today. Today, when I'm restricting the opportunities, and you can't do this, and I'm controlling, America does not have a chance to become America. Therefore, learn from it. Do not limit your opportunities, whether it is because of money, of fame and career. The sky is not the limit. There is no limit to your abilities. Your abilities are greater than you ever know. You would never know how powerful you are. You simply need to let go. When you let go, you allow the shefa, the wealth, to come down. So Yiratzon mi'akadosh Baruch Hu, that we live life of expansion. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not restrict the world. He said, expand! And the universe, from that moment of Bereshit, it keeps on expanding. And the distance gets bigger for more room, for better opportunities. So if somebody's trying to restrict you or doubt your abilities, you know that this person is not for you, and this job is not for you, and this workplace is not for you. Create the opportunities for yourself. Organize yourself. Follow the path of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu put this world into action, and you'll be successful. Success is not determined by how much money you make and how much power you possess. Success is determined how fulfilled your life is, how much you were able to tap into the infinite. This is success. Chazak u'baruch.